All right, so before I show you the numbers, let me just say this up front. The first two residential rentals that I bought, the cash-on-cash returns were roughly 16.5 and 18%. Now that is unusually high for today's market. Um, the two properties, I would say I found them at the right time, got a little lucky. Um, when I analyzed these two new properties that I was looking at this past week and made offers, I was shooting for that kind of target range, which is very aggressive and probably going to be very difficult. But that's the metric that I'm going against when I'm looking for properties. I'm looking for the higher end of cash-on-cash returns. My understanding is the rough estimate for around Northeast Ohio is 8 to 12%, higher or lower depending upon the market. That's what I'm shooting for, and that's why in my particular situation it's probably going to be a more challenging situation. But I wanted to lead with that because I want to make sure that it's very clear what my goals are. And my goals are going to be different probably than many of the viewers, because this is going to be a much harder, these are much harder parameters to work with. So I'm going to talk about the two properties I looked at. The offers both got rejected. Potential rationales for why, and what I'm planning on doing going forward. So I ran the numbers and my projections quite a bit before making the offers. Both sellers still, obviously, they said no. I felt like, at least for my goals, these made sense on paper, but the offers were ultimately rejected. And here's kind of a rough breakdown again as to what I was looking at with the properties. The brief little rundown. Property number one was a 3-bed, 1-bath, 1,068 square feet. The inside was manageable. The carpet was very dirty. I felt like that it wasn't to the point of replacing the carpet. It would need a good clean with like a rug doctor or maybe hiring a Stanley steamer, worst case scenario. But I felt like it was something I could handle with a rug doctor in an afternoon. The backsplash around the kitchen was hardly a backsplash. It looked like somebody had cut up wallpaper and very poorly attached it to the walls. Again, not a huge repair, but shoring that up so that it looked nice. One of the bedrooms upstairs didn't have a door on it. Obviously there's going to be cost associated with putting a new door there. Not a huge repair, but also potentially more expensive. And black mold in the basement. Again, I've taken care of black mold before in other properties. I'm not don't love it, but I mean, that's something that is fixable. But obviously, given all of this, I was less inclined to pay top dollar for the property. They asked $95K, and then the property, the best estimate that I come up with for monthly rent was around $1,200 a month. I offer $75K. Obviously, that's significantly lower than what they were asking for. Typically, what I like to do, I offer $75, ask for any type of counter offer. Didn't really go that way. It was just radio silence. No feedback, no counter offer. Just kind of got ghosted, which I guess is a potential possibility when you're going this low, but whatever. In the past, typically if I offer something really low, there's back and forth, and then we see if we can meet in the middle. Didn't happen here. Property number two, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 840 square foot home. What I liked about this one was it was move-in ready. What I didn't like about it was no basement. There was a crawl space deep enough for a hot water tank to stand up. Excuse me. They also had a water softener in the basement, but the floor was dirt, and it was, so I'm 5'11". I couldn't really stand up completely in the basement. That's about how tall the ceiling height was. It wasn't really usable space. A similar home on that same street actually sold about 2 months ago for $70K with a basement. Similar square feet, 2-bed, 1-bath, $70K with a usable basement. So $84,900 with no basement, I felt like was a terrible price. The rent was estimated to be around $900 a month. Cash on cash returns at that point were lower than what I wanted. I offered them 55. Again, that's really pretty low. But again, it's a small house. The outside needed a little bit of work, nothing real bad like power washing and, fixing some of the gutters, hanging them, tying them up to the house a little better. But pretty close to move-in ready. But it was a small house. It wasn't going to be a big rent generator. So that's where I came up with my dollar amount. Again, my thought was we'd have a little bit of back and forth, but that didn't happen. I think the agent was insulted with the number, and it just kind of went nowhere. So neither of the offers were accepted, and the thing of it is I think there's a couple different problems going on. I think there are still sellers out there that are expecting prices back 2020, 2021, 2022. Sellers that still want peak pricing, despite the fact that we're not there anymore. The interest rates obviously aren't as cheap as what they used to be. Doesn't make sense on my end as an investor to pay peak price. And that could be a potential reason. Number two, maybe they didn't really need to sell. Maybe they have this property, it's paid off. They just want to throw a number out there, see what sticks. They got time to kill. They can wait all year long. They can wait forever and, see what happens. If there's not a real intense need to sell, there's not going to be an intense desire to negotiate. With the very most recent property that I bought, there was intense desire to sell, and I was one of the first people to connect with the owner, and so I got it at a very good price. I don't think that's the case with these two properties. The other thing too, my numbers are really prioritizing my desires for cash flow, not for appreciation. And obviously, the sellers are going to want, to see appreciation with the property. And then that's going to create kind of this gap between what I expect and what they expect. And that led to things just not working out. Where my offer is bad, they were pretty low, but I mean, I would just look at it like that our goals did not perfectly align. In terms of what I could have done differently, I'm always open to ideas or suggestions. If you got any ideas or suggestions, feel free to comment. But again, my goal is to get the highest cash on cash return that I can. This is an investment. This is part of my livelihood, and this isn't that area. There's some flexibility, but also I don't want to dramatically lower my expectations and start to purchase, bad deals on my end. Am I glad it didn't happen? Kind of. I mean, it's a pain to go through all this process to view the homes, to sift through the MLS, and it's time consuming. But the reality is, overpaying is going to kill returns on my end. Can you make bad deals work? Yeah, but it certainly isn't ideal. And I would say that I would argue that discipline beats deal count, or door count, if you will. I would rather have a relatively smaller amount of properties that I got at a good price and they're cash flowing well than have this very, very large count, that were not necessarily, the greatest deals in the world. I guess the take home that I would say, not every almost deal is a missed opportunity. Okay, these could be, headaches in the making, and these could also be sour deals that, I just like anybody else, I don't have an unlimited amount of cash, and I've got to make my cash count. The numbers, obviously, you got to look at the numbers. Numbers have to supersede emotions, and it's got to make sense. So that's really it in a nutshell. I know it's a little long, but feel free to comment. Feel free to share any experience you have, experiences that you have looking for properties. Any questions that you have, feel free to post in the comments. I'll try to answer them as much as I can. I've viewed a lot of homes over the past couple of years since I've been going through this process, and trying to build up my portfolio. Again, I'm relatively new, but growing my portfolio, trying to do the best I can. So feel free to ask any questions you can. I'll respond to them as quickly as I can. Thanks.